You're listening to Raising Anchor on 990 WBOB. Welcome to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show with Matt Entrigan and Jason Carey. Your home for news, analysis, and everything Rhode Island FC. Each week, they take you inside the locker room, inside the tactics, and inside the storyline shaping RIFC. Now, here's Matt and Jason.
Rhode Island FC hold the best of the West to a draw, securing 1 point against Orange County Soccer Club in a night that had goals for, goals against, and of course, rain at Centerville Bank Stadium. Was this as good of a game as we deserved? And was this, more importantly, a pressure test for some midweek action as the boys in amber and blue head all the way to California to take on the Sacramento Republic? We're going to figure that out. We're going to break down the game. We're going to preview the next one here. It's a double show week because World Cup is going to be on a pause, and the only thing you should be watching tomorrow is Rhode Island FC. First and foremost, though, got to check in with the co-host with the most, Mr. Jason Carey. Jason, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing all right. Trying to get over the stinging exit there. That was last night's USA match. Kind of a bit of a reality check for us. I think there was a lot of hype around the team, and I mean the tournament overall, with the exception of maybe a few issues at the beginning, was going really well, and the USA was doing well. I mean, the other host nations were to a certain extent as well. And it all kind of came crashing down here in the round of 16. I don't really believe in karma or jinxes, but in this case, I think that there was whether or not he actually did it, there was some political intervention. Someone or at least claimed that they did. And I think it brought some kind of maybe bad karma to the team. I've watched this Belgium team play a lot, and they were clueless in the group stages. They looked abysmal.
Completely different team
than
what we saw.
And they showed up with a chip on their shoulder like they had something to prove. And it didn't help that we also shot ourselves in the foot with a really lot of poor defensive errors, but that was not a performance from them that we should have lost maybe 2-1, right? It shouldn't have been an absolute thrashing.
A lot of people online complaining about the fact that we lost as both the host nation and not advancing past the round of 16, something, again, we have not done since 2002 when we made it to the quarterfinals. You could argue, well, we still made it through one knockout round because of the expanded format, but I don't think there was a lot of American fans that thought we could go all the way. I think maybe in the back of our minds, those dark recesses where we don't speak those parts out loud, we keep them quiet to ourselves. Maybe we believe, maybe we're like, this team's good enough to compete. And then it all came crashing down, like you said. It wasn't just a loss. It was a complete collapse from the U.S. men's national team side. Not the game that we wanted to exit and bow out of the tournament. And I think, to your point, if it had been a closer game, whether it was a 2-1, a 1-0 loss, a 0-0 that went to penalties and they just didn't go our way, some better answers as to the future of this squad, the future of soccer in this country. But instead, when you're on the highest pedestal and the nation's eyes are upon you, it's like they just didn't show up to this game. It was disjointed, disconnected. It was disappointing. I said that last night to a couple people at High Motor. It just felt like they never woke up and realized that they had to play the biggest game of their lives. And, I've heard pundits talk about they didn't have fight, they didn't have tenacity. It just felt like to me that they didn't realize that they had to play soccer that day, because I was, by the end of the game, with about 30 minutes to go, the people that were sitting at my table, we started playing a game of, can America string together more than 3 passes before they get dispossessed off the ball? And guess what, Jason? They never did it again for almost 30 minutes. It was trying to move the ball as fast as forward as possible, and then it would just get shut down by a Belgian side that definitely had something to play for. And ironically, from Belgium, they didn't start Lukaku or De Bruyne. Lukaku does amazing damage at the end, just to put like the cherry on top of that defeat. And it is what it is. So I'm going to ask you this question because we're going to reminisce just for a little bit before we get into all of the Rhode Island FC action. Was this a worse game when we talk U.S. versus Belgium in World Cup? Was this a worse performance than the 2014 result? And do we owe Chris Wondolowski an apology?
I'm not going to go as far as to say we owe Chris Wondolowski an apology, because I do not care for the San Jose Earthquakes at all. However, I do think that this was a worse performance. I think when we go and look back to that game, we took it to 120 minutes. Remember, that game had fight in it, and that's just what was missing from this game. There wasn't that like claw back into the game. It felt like there was a few moments where we were maybe going to get back into it. One of those moments is kind of right before Matt Freese forgot how to kick a ball.
He just wanted to kick the ground as hard as he could. It's not that he forgot the ball. He hates the ground that he was standing on.
He was just spamming fake shot and just completely missed. But before that, it kind of felt like there was a little bit of like fight in the team to get back in, and that maybe just killed the spark in them. I would rather them to see them, even if there is no hope, to kind of continue to go for it. And it just kind of felt like hopeless long balls, and that they just really couldn't string anything together.
Yeah, I think after the Freese mistake, I think that's kind of took the wind out of the sails. Maybe the team still thinking there was a possibility after Tillman had scored in that free kick. I'll tell you this right now. You talk about fight and who would have brought it had they been substituted on. We saw Berhalter. We saw Reyna to a certain extent really trying to like change the attitude on the pitch. But you know who would have been the dog you needed in that fight? Diego Luna. And
absolutely.
That's all there is to it at this point. So I didn't see Christian Roldan, I think, even play in the tournament.
He was like injured.
Again, my point to it. So
I also want to say, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think that after this tournament, I think Pulisic is a fraud. I'm not really impressed with him.
I don't think he's at the levels of Landon Donovan or Clint Dempsey like we have elevated him to.
Yeah.
I think he's a perfectly mid-range player that can augment a team, like a Jermaine Jones. Was never going to be the star of the show, had some sensational moments, but he was never leading that locker room. He was never the hope was, on his shoulders. There's talent there, but I don't think he is Mr. or Captain America by any sense of the.
I don't think he has that dog in him. Apparently, after the game, the interview, he's like, "Well, now we get to rest for the upcoming season." I was like,
"You play for the badge in front, not the name on the back." Hence the Diego Luna comment. Look, we'll see what happens with this roster. They'll go into Gold Cup here in the year to come, and we'll see how they do in CONCACAF time. Jason, right now, looking at the quarterfinal lineup, there are no CONCACAF teams left. There's only one CAF team, one CONMEBOL team left. The rest of this is back to the UEFA show. Do we dare put any predictions in as to who might go all the way at this point? Or is there a team that we're rooting for now that the US is out?
I mean, probably Norway, just the Vikings, because that's fun. It'd be a fun storyline. Realistically, I still think this is France's tournament until proven otherwise. Maybe some people, based upon a game that happened earlier today, might think that, a certain organization wants a certain South American team to win, but
the script is in. All right. Argentina is going to win the whole thing just because that's what Egypt is telling everyone. It's not the fact that Egypt let in 3 goals uncontested and unanswered. It's because the script writers for FIFA want Argentina to win the entirety of that game. Think what you want about it, but all you had to do is stop one of those goals from going in, and you could have still been at least talking a different story if it had gone all the way to extra time plus pens. But listen, hashtag not a World Cup soccer show. I think Norway is the right fit. We'll have to see how they do against England. But we got to get into this Rhode Island FC conversation, and let's talk about league standings. Obviously, Rhode Island FC come off of a 1-1 draw. We earn a point. So, Jason, that should mean, for all intent and purposes, we've moved up the table, right? We're no longer in 9th, right?
Well, we still find ourselves kind of in the basement there, never-ending 9th place. RFC now back to a perfectly balanced 4-4-4 record. 16 points here after that 1-1 draw. I guess the silver line is you could say that was a first-place team in the West. But we're still 2 to 3 games behind most teams. So I'd say a draw isn't the worst result, especially maybe considering the opponents. Maybe we'll unpack that a little bit more later. But there's still plenty of game time for us to kind of claw some points back and move up that table.
So we've drawn against Orange County at home. We've now drawn against Tampa Bay at home. Definitely contenders to make things difficult for teams at the top of the table. Speaking about Sacramento as our next opponents, meanwhile, they also sit on a 4-4-4 record. Weirdly enough, though, in the Western Conference, that's only good enough to get you 10th. So, you talked about silver linings a second ago. Maybe that's the Eastern silver lining, despite the fact that we have an extra team in our conference this season. This game screams big midweek opportunity, I should say. Both of these teams, a win could get them back over the playoff line and get some of those, casual eyes and concerns on where the performance of these individual teams are. But this is also going to be a question because it is midweek action for Rhode Island FC. It is a team in Sacramento that probably should be higher up the table, but is not. Again, you could say the same thing. And it's going to be a curiosity as these two teams they're the only teams, by the way, in the Western Conference and Eastern Conference that have seen each other every single year. Oddly enough, last year and the year before that, Sacramento has come and played at home in Rhode Island 3 times. So it's one of those weird things where we've seen them in 2 home games of the season, and then we got them in the Jägermeister tournament play where we don't like to talk about that match. But as far as Western Conference teams go, we've had a lot of looks at Sacramento. We just never have gone to Sacramento to ply our trade there. A very interesting match ahead on that. But we're going to go to our first break because we have tons to break down tonight. And when we return, we're going to look at how Rhode Island FC set themselves up for success against Orange County last weekend on the 4th of July. Don't go anywhere. It's the Raising Anchor Soccer Show. Thank you for listening to tonight's broadcast powered by Sprout Coworking. For all your business needs, large or small, visit sproutcoworking.com. Powering 990 WBOB, that's sproutcoworking.com.
Now, let's get back to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show on 990 WBOB with Matt Entrican and Jason Carey.
All right, taking a quick look at how Kano set up here for the match. As always, we've got Koke Vegas and net here. A back four of Nick Scardina, Kari Fayao, Grant Stoneman, and Frank Nodarse. Holding midfielders here of Clay Holstad and Ugo Bacharach, with your attacking midfielders being Jose Quizera, Amos Shapiro-Thompson, and Augustine Pitti Rodriguez, with JJ Williams up top as that lone striker.
Looking back at the predictions we made on this game, only one that we really got wrong. We weren't sure about Grant Stoneman versus Frank Nodarse. We've seen limited success from that pair so far this season. Grant Stoneman gets the nod to the start, makes his 150th USL regular season appearance. So what a milestone, what a feather to put in your hat there. Frank Nodarse back out wide. We had predicted maybe Aldair had earned a way back into this starting lineup. Not the case here. But one other interesting thing that we saw on the night, got to talk about it. Jose Quizera, no longer the inverted winger, but instead playing back on the left like we had seen for extended periods in this game. Now, of course, one of Kano's favorite tricks is to, swap his wingers and flip them throughout the game to kind of disorient defenders and cause some chaos going into the final third. But predominantly saw Jose Quizera on the left this night. Didn't really see him and didn't have an impact feeling him out on the right. Thoughts on what we were thinking that was all about?
Yeah, it was interesting to see him kind of move back over there, especially where we've seen him have some success while playing on the right and being able to kind of, contribute a lot of goals here this season, with something we haven't seen him do as much in the past. I wonder if that comes down to Pitti, right? Is this Kano trying to get more out of Pitti by kind of testing what his best position is on the field? We saw Amos Shapiro-Thompson come back into the fold, and he kind of has made that center attacking midfielder position his own, as kind of like the tipping point with the 2 holding midfielders behind him there. And so we're kind of playing around with the wings to find what's that best combination. I think for Quizera, we've seen that it potentially is the right there, but he played in the left in the first seasons. So maybe this is an opportunity to try and get out more out of Pitti.
Is Pitti doing enough? I know we talked about this, I think, a few episodes ago. With the break, it's hard to just immediately go back and recall it. But we know that Pitti might not be the player that's going to be a 10 and 10, midfielder, attacking midfielder. He may only get single digits in one category. He may not score a single goal this season and only be from the assist side of things. Is he doing enough that we've seen to demonstrate? Because we've had cases about, Leo Afonso, should he be starting over Pitti? Amos Shapiro-Thompson, I think, has solidified a spot in the starting 11. Is Pitti doing enough at this point in your impressions?
I don't know. It's hard to say with him. I feel like he doesn't have bad games per se, but I feel like the expectations were that he would bring goals and assists. They're just not really getting that out of him. I think we are getting better numbers from Leo as he's coming off the bench. So I maybe we could try something similar with Augustine. I don't know, but then who do you put back out there? I mean, do you try and just throw Sanchez up there, make him play a winger? It's kind of a interesting problem for Kano to kind of figure out like what is his best position and how can we get the best out of him.
It'll be something we have to watch as the injuries are starting to pile up. We'll talk about that in the preview here in a bit. Getting back to the roster that was selected for game day, getting back into the Frank Nodarce versus Aldair Sanchez component of it. Looked at some of the overlying stats. It's hard to qualify one player versus the other. I think both of them provide a couple of different things. There's a willingness to dribble and duel on that left side, and there is a solid defensive composure. I think Aldair offers more from the crossing game. I think he's a little bit more accurate with getting the ball into the mixer, but I think Sanchez, Nodarce brings a little bit more stability to the back line, and his presence in set piece offense and set piece defending has not been ignored or missed. It has been a key component of some of the recent success. Knowing that and now kind of seeing it looks like it's Nodarce's spot to lose now. Is this a case where Connor Smith is leaning more towards that stability that Nodarce brings in the set piece part of it and the management there of the game? Or is it something where Aldair Sanchez's game needs to evolve to the next level expectation? Because if we know one thing about Kano, when you're not doing what he wants to see get done, it gets hard to suddenly find starts. I'm looking at you, Gabby Alves. I'm looking at you, Steven Turnbull. Like, how do those moments happen to where Sanchez can find his way back into that starting 11?
It's hard to say. I also wonder too, in regards to the way that Kano looks at this team defensively. We know that he really wants to be like have a solid defense, and I know that we have, but also that there are times when this season we've looked a little shaky, and I don't know, maybe that's him kind of, like you said, relying on Nodarce for that solidity, the stability, whereas Sanchez is a left back, but he also is kind of a bit more of an attacking left back, if you will.
Does Sanchez need to start trying more bikes more often? Because clearly that's what Frank's been trying to do to wow the crowd lately.
I don't know. Maybe we just need to see a little bit more flair from Sanchez's game for him to kind of sneak his way back in.
He needs that Brazilian street baller.
But also it's a long season, right? We've got 3 games this week. I mean, we could very well see Sanchez start tomorrow and then just kind of get some rotation. I know that the guys are rested, but at the same time, you don't want to have them come off of rest and immediately run them right into the ground.
Agreed. Who are your heroes and zeros of the match?
Hero's going to be AST. I wasn't sure where he'd fit into this lineup, but he's really made himself a first choice and like just consistently playing super well. Zero is going to be Tim Ream. He really had a poor performance. I can't believe that he didn't. Oh wait, we're not talking about that game, are we?
I see what you did there. My heroes for the game got to be Hugo Bacharach with the lone goal, but just also his attacking prowess on the night and multiple looks at net from range, multiple set piece attempts. Really provided a lot of spark when the game was kind of dying off on the wings. Orange County was compact. They stayed very defensively deep, and it was hard to find those opportunities, even though there was a ton of shots, Jason, which we'll talk about here in a second. Hugo's got to be the man of the match for me, or at least my hero. The zero has got to be the rain. When we looked at the weather and did the last show, it was 80 degrees. There was no rain within 38-hour corridor on either side. And then by the time it's game day, I'm suddenly seeing warnings that the rain is 10:30 p.m. Now it's 8 p.m. We got to stop getting washed out at Centerville Bank Stadium. I'm not complaining about it for me, but fans are not going to show up if this stadium continues to get rain like this. It's something's got to be done. I don't know if it's afternoon games. It wouldn't help today. It's been raining all day, but like, man, I'm getting sick and tired of the rain.
Yeah, I really need to get some more people in there. It just we're cursed this year. I don't know what it is.
Absolutely. So let's start things off now with Kano's opening statement. We'll listen to what he had to say about the game and then kind of reflect and open it up with our own. So here's Coach Kano Smith on the performance against Orange County Soccer Club.
Good teams, two pretty evenly matched. Wasn't much between the teams. I think they had a period in the first half where they were 10 to 15 minutes where they were superior. Then after the water break, I thought we went in halftime with momentum. We came out of halftime with momentum. Obviously, we scored, had enough corner kicks, had enough set pieces. Probably not enough in open play to be dangerous, but I think we still had some. But I don't think they caused us many problems. I think they had good possession, but weren't really dangerous with it. But yeah, then the kid Sila, I thought he was probably the best player on the field tonight, and he had one moment and decided the game.
I can't disagree with anything Connor just said. I do want to quickly call out the hydration breaks. It was warm enough, I guess, to warrant. I'm not sure what the USL handbook determines is like what's the necessary temperature or humidity that you would have to do hydration, pause the dehydrations. But it was kind of weird to see considering how much chatter that has gotten. And then the first game during the World Cup that's at home at Centerville Bank Stadium, there's a hydration break. Do you think this is something that's going to start living within the? Because if the USL could do one thing right now, it's make more money. Are we going to get hydration breaks in the USL?
I really hope not. It's hydration breaks are a thing that have been around, but like you said, there's usually some sort of criteria. I don't know exactly what that criteria is, but it's never been more than like 30 seconds to a minute. So to see this kind of sneak into the game, not a fan.
Agreed. Getting into the actual match again, I have to agree with Kano here. This game did not feel like Orange County was ever in the driver's seat. Yes, they did have the lion's share of possession, but when you look at how much Rhode Island was trying to dominate their will on this match, it just never really felt like Orange County was in this game for anything other than a draw and was just happy to walk away with a point at that. I look at the shots, total shots, 24 total shots for Rhode Island FC, just 3 on target there. We've talked about the clinicalness. We've talked about the need to finish in these opportunities. 44 touches in the opposition box. Jason, they only found the ball 9 times in Rhode Island FC's box. This just did not feel like they were tested. They did not feel like they were put to task by this number 1 team in the Western Conference. And again, I know that they're playing away. They're not playing at their own home stadium in Championship Park, but it just felt like Orange County's job on the night was to recycle possession, try to keep the ball away from Rhode Island FC as much as possible, and then just lock down whenever Rhode Island looked at their goal mouth. And that's all there was to it.
Yeah, I mean, even with all that possession you talk about, they barely went for it. Along with those 9 touches, they only had 2 shots on target. I mean, with one on target, or sorry, 2 shots and 1 on target. So with that, they got 1 goal. I mean, part of that.
I think the other one hit the woodwork on that deflection. So, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's just maybe a bit of luck on their side, considering how much RAFC dominated the game. It wasn't able to convert there.
Just 85 passes in Rhode Island FC's own half for the entirety of that game, considering Orange County by trade 238 passes in their own half. Rhode Island should have won this game. They absolutely should have. And I think a couple things come from this. I think we talked about the importance of could they continue that momentum out of the Loudoun game, or would this break stifle some of that? And I think we saw it. I wouldn't say necessarily that the players were tired, but I think that there's a mentality going into these moments, these matches, that just didn't quite settle in this game. And that's why we saw it, because it felt like so many times, if they took the extra pass, if they just lifted their head and took the extra touch, that a ball could have found its way past an Orange County defender. Instead, it was, and we've seen this before, it was impatience, it was hurry, it was send it in without waiting for the player to find the channel to connect with the ball on the cross or the secondary recovery or the deflection. We just never seem to be in the right place to take advantage of goals that we've seen success from this season. And unfortunately, it does not come to pass as the match ends up 1-1. Want to talk about what Kano said about the extended break and the momentum of the team?
Yeah, just keep doing what they're doing. I think it was important for them to rest and recover and relax. Like, it's been a difficult 6 months, not more difficult than anybody else, but it's pro sports. It's difficult, so it was good for them to get away and relax. But I thought they came back in pretty good shape. You could see a little bit of fatigue tonight, but honestly, it wasn't. It was more just get away, recover mentally.
Anything you disagree about that? We asked ourselves, did this time off create rust? Did it slow these players down? Was this physical fatigue, or was this probably maybe like a mental lapse in just getting things done at home?
I think it's just probably a little bit of mental lapse / rust, if you will. If you're doing something week in, week out, it kind of builds that routine. You take a few weeks off, maybe you need an extra game or two to get back into a groove, if you will. I think considering the way that this game could have gone very differently against a top, place opponent, can't hate it too much, but definitely felt like you said that RFC really had a good opportunity to win this game, and maybe had this been a continuation from after the Loudoun game without such a long break, maybe we would have found a second goal there to get away with all 3 points.
One of the things I do want to talk about as well in this game, and just to bring it up now, and it's not the same story that people always hear from us, but I want to talk about the refereeing experience here for a moment. One of the things that surprised me about Orange County's defense and the way that they wanted to play the game was the amount of fouls that were committed or interpreted by the referee. We've heard this story to a certain extent in the past about referees controlling the game, about referees inserting themselves into the narrative. But I got to tell you, man, after watching the World Cup, and there's been such a emphasis on letting the play continue, letting the game flow, a almost kind of restriction or rescinding of cards and fouls that we would see at all levels of the game across the world. It felt like the mandate this time around with FIFA has been, let the boys play. It's been really difficult to watch that last game and go from, hacks and slashes and, bruises and shoves that historically have been fouls around the planet, not getting called, right? Just seeing that dudes coming together, fighting and battling for the ball. And now it's like the wind blows over an Orange County player, they flop to the ground, and a foul has been committed. A murder has been committed, if you will. 22 fouls from Rhode Island FC side, just 12 from Orange County. It reminds me of the early days of this club when we asked Kano, is there a physicality problem in this league? It felt like we went right back to that. And I don't know if it was JC Griggs. I started searching, like, where does he come from? Spoiler alert, everyone. He's a referee that was born and raised in Southern California. But also, like, is this just, I've now seen what it should look like from a pace and a flow in World Cup action. And I just have to reset my own expectations here in USL play.
I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. There's definitely a reset of expectations that these are lower division refs. They're not going to, unfortunately, be nearly as good as what we're getting to experience here in the World Cup. But also at the same time, we've seen the other side of the coin too, right? We've seen games where they're just beating up on JJ and there's just nothing being called. So it's, how do we find that happy middle ground? Maybe with the World Cup here, maybe we'll get a few more soccer fans, and it'll just kind of it'll be a slow burn. We'll kind of keep building it up, but it's definitely frustrating. I notice it too with the refs compared to what we've been experiencing.
So getting back to this draw, Rhode Island FC now unbeaten in their last 3 games across all competitions, also now holding a 6-win, 5 draws, and 1 loss record through 12 games across all competitions at Centerville Bank Stadium. The only loss coming from that Birmingham Legion game, because you can't count the Revolution Open Cup match because it wasn't a home game. But otherwise, this team's still flying high. Want to ask, was this the momentum that you build upon, or was this just a stop in time and the performance still needs to also reset as they take it to Sacramento here in a bit?
You could definitely build on this momentum. Look at it as we got a point against a top place team in the West. Same way as we got a point against Tampa Bay. It's, we didn't lose. We scored a goal. So I think there's definitely a lot that can be built upon here. I think if we go out to Sacramento and have a bad time, well, then maybe you think, okay, maybe was that just a blip, and we kind of need a little bit more time to get back into a groove.
Asked Kano how he felt about playing the best in the West, and here's what he had to say about that.
Possibly. I don't know if that's the first. How many Western Conference teams have we played against? Have we played against anybody?
I mean, their first place in the Western Conference, right?
Right. But you say, are they standard bearer in the West or totally in the league?
Just in the Western Conference, right?
Yeah. Who else have we played in the West? I don't know. I wouldn't. Have we played anybody else? I can't think of us playing anybody else.
Lexington.
Yeah, Lexington. Yeah. I mean, yeah. For me, they're better than Lexington. I mean, Sacramento, they're going to be difficult too. But yeah, clearly, they're the top of the West for a reason. Yeah.
So, he agrees that they are the top of the West for a reason. Didn't really want to commit whether or not they were a good team that he saw. And I think he wanted to mind his P's and Q's on that one, as, if that is the best, like, the Western Conference shouldn't be too terrifying. But nevertheless, I still think that Rhode Island really ran through Orange County. Want to talk about the goal from Hugo Bacharach in the 51st minute. Amos Shapiro-Thompson taking the corner kick, finding Hugo Bacharach on the in-swinger. We talk about set pieces, and it was abysmal last season. It was depressing to see Rhode Island FC attempt set piece offense and sometimes set piece defense. I don't think we can say that anymore here with this Rhode Island FC side now. I think when you go across all competitions, I think fans have been treated to 6 Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches now. The fans want chicken, and Kano Smith and company are delivering this season. You gotta love what happens with Hugo Bacharach connecting on that goal with Amos Shapiro-Thompson.
Yeah, it was great to see. That was actually Hugo Bacharach's second professional goal for Rhode Island FC, and his second straight game with a goal contribution. And that was Amos Shapiro's third assist of the season across all competitions, and has assisted goals in back-to-back home games.
Yeah, I talked to Kano about the importance of a player like Hugo Bacharach on this team, and this is what he had to say about that.
Yeah, Hugo's physical, his size, he's good at breaking stuff up, but he's I mean, so many of them are key, but I think you can tell by the minutes played since he's been back and been healthy how much we value him.
So not much to say about the 6'5", 6'6" midfielder, but I did have a conversation with Hugo. We can share that in a second, but getting back into the set piece part here, wanted to ask Kano what the significance of the set piece strategy had become this season, and this is what he had to add about that.
We saw it as an area that we needed to improve. So that was from all of us, from me, the coaching staff, the players. Like we needed to be more effective in those situations. And as you can see, games when you cannot generate a lot from open play, set pieces are so important. But you see them all over the world. So it was an area that we needed to get better. And it started with me, and trickles down to the players.
I like the answer. It's accountability on him first and foremost before the players. We're now seeing that success. So having said that, we get the initial goal in the 51st minute. Unfortunately, Osamani Silla equalizes in the 67th for Orange County. He's going out far wide on a recovery for a second ball. He just does enough body movement to get to Jojea's left, takes the in-swinger shot for himself. Scardina's leaning the wrong way, and Koke is obviously protecting near post there for the shot, and it just finds the gap right between them. It was a good goal. I have to give credit. It's not like the U.S. men's national team where we were just giving up goals because of sloppy mistakes. That being said, we can't find a way to get back into the game and score another goal despite multiple looks at net. Leo Afonso with some chances, Pity with some chances, JJ with some chances. I think the biggest one came in the final seconds of the game. Amos Shapiro-Thompson on a breakaway skirts Rondo as the goalkeeper for Orange County and slots one across, and it's 4 inches. If it's 4 inches closer to the right, that ball is in, and Amos Shapiro-Thompson is a hero. He's already a hero, but he's a real hero. You got to start building the statue. What is missing from Rhode Island FC at this point to not win that game outright? Because it feels like they should have.
Yeah, I agree with you on the goal. I think that's one of those that you look at and there's really not a lot you could do about that. That's where you need to go out and just score another. And we tried, but I think that's just a bit of the rust, if you will, from not playing, competitive matches, if you will, for feels like 3 weeks, however long that was. Felt like forever.
It was forever.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned unless we continue on putting up 20 shots and only getting 1 goal.
Well, we shall see as we head to Sacramento. It is the farthest travel that we have to do this season, as they have already headed out to take on this action tomorrow on Wednesday. We've got to go to break, and when we return, we will break down everything going on for Rhode Island FC ahead of this midweek game, all here on the Raising Anchor Soccer Show. Fans, as the weather becomes more and more unpredictable, be sure to check out 990 WBOB's weather page for all your temperature, storm, and travel info. Stay prepared for whatever Mother Nature has in store with the 990 WBOB weather page.
Now, let's get back to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show on 990 WBOB with Matt Entrican and Jason Carey.
Breaking down RAFC's head-to-head record with Sacramento. We've played 2 regular season matches against them and 1 USL Cup match. First meeting was back in Bern. That was that 2-2 draw that saw Jack P kind of arrive onto the stadium, and we kind of felt like, oh, maybe something is finally building here.
He was the chosen one.
He was the chosen one. We saw an attack from the team that we hadn't really seen previously, and kind of didn't hit the ground running right away after that, as of course we all know that he left again. But it was a glimpse of hope there. Following year saw RAFC meet up with Sacramento twice. Once in a 2-0 loss in the regular season, and the second where they knocked us out on penalties after a 0-0 draw in the Jägermeister Cup.
I still will never forget that Jägermeister game, because I brought friends out from work and said, hey, this is the new exciting thing to do in the city, inside the town, inside the state. And when it went to 0-0, I was like, it's okay. This was a bulletproof plan, because no matter what, you'll see electricity, you'll see sparks in that penalty shootout. I totally forgot that it's still possible to never convert a goal in a penalty shootout. So sometimes you get those terribly wrong. And then, of course, in that regular season loss 2-0, Cool Will in the chat reminding us of the Roro Messi-esque goal that he had before he retired and hung up the boots forever. This is a team that you have to admit, like right now, they have our number in the sense of at least the head-to-head record. We've talked at length about how fantastic this team has been as a contender in the West, and every time we've met with them, these have been hard-fought battles. Even if the results don't go our way, it'll be really curious to see how Sacramento looks now in this new version of themselves under Neil Collins. But we're not on the Sacramento part just yet. We got to talk shop Rhode Island FC, and fans, buckle up, because you are not going to like what I'm about to say next. As far as the availability report goes at this time, we still have CJ Williams marked as questionable. We asked in the post game if CJ Williams and Amity Diop would be available anytime soon. CJ Williams was almost game to game. Amity Diop was probably a couple more weeks out. Talked with Amity directly out and about around the stadium. He's itching to get back in, so it's probably one of those precautionary wait and see moments, because they don't want to rush whatever that nagging injury is to Amity. So Amity will not be available. And then based on what we saw from last weekend's availability report, Jamin Gogo Peters also listed as questionable, and Zach Harivo remaining questionable until we know more. The big one, though, unfortunately, and I think a lot of people saw this that attended the game or watched the match, Clay Holstead going down after taking a knock early, or I should say midway through the first half, got back up, continued to play on, went down again, struggling as it was getting into the final minutes of the first half, comes out as a substitute in the halftime. Saw Clay Holstead in a immobilizer boot, knew that he was going to go get some x-rays and some recovery research done on him. But for all intent and purpose, it did not look good as he was limping out of the stadium. I can imagine right now he did not make the trip down or over to Sacramento, so he will not be available for this match. What we have to wait and see now, Jason, is we have to come to terms with how long could this injury possibly be? Is this just a bruise, a contusion? Is this a fracture? Is this a break? Is this something more in the ligature? We don't know anything yet, but we could see Clay Holstead out for as little as maybe 2 weeks, or it could be, 3 to 4 months. So Everyone should be just hoping and ready to see Clay Holston back as soon as possible. But as of right now, he will not be available for that Wednesday match. So this makes predicting the starting 11, I think, a little bit harder than usual. Already depleted in that midfield. What do you got, Jason?
Yeah, so we're obviously going to have Koke Vegas in net here. We're thinking the back four is going to remain pretty much the same there with Nick Scardina, Karifa Yao, Grant Stoneman, Frank Nodarce, with no Clay. I think in that Amos Shapiro Thompson will kind of sit there next to Ugo Bacharach in the holding midfielder position. We'll see Jose Quizera, Augustine Rodriguez, and Leo Alfonso as your attacking midfielders, with JJ Williams up top.
I think at this point, not knowing the status of Zach Harivo and whether or not he's ready to be reinserted into this roster, midfield was kind of always going to be one of the smallest places in this squad this year. We lost Maxi Rodriguez, we lost Mark Ibarra. We lost more midfielders than we gained when it came time for preseason and into regular season play. Now with so many possibly laid up, I think there's no other answer to this other than you either drop Amos Shapiro Thompson down to be the double pivot and partner with Hugo, or you leave Hugo as the, independent, individualistic number 6, and you bring a double pivot more forward towards the 8 position, or like a pair of double 10s. Either way, whether it's Amos dropping back or staying up, I think this forces Augustine back into the middle, and we see Leo Alfonso out on the wing. I can't see this go. I mean, you could put Noah Fuson in for one of those two positions, but I think no matter what, if we're going with who's in the best shape, who's ready to take on this match on Wednesday, that's got to be it. It's just where you move that pivot at this point, right?
Yeah, like we'll most likely see Noah and Busy, but I just don't see them as starting caliber just yet.
Is there an argument that Noah's tucked into the middle and Leo still rides the bench?
It's possible. I guess it depends on where we see, or where coach, I guess should say, sees Leo Alfonso. I think we've played him in enough games in that position, and I think he's done well. He's just not converted enough chances. So
he missed the sitter. Well, it wasn't a sitter, but he missed probably one of the best looks at goal on the weekend, at least trying to get Rhode Island FC back up above Orange County. So I agree. I think he's done enough to be in the start, but I think he's got a lot more that he needs to do. He needs to put more in the tank and show us that he can be a little bit more clinical when it comes to these matches ahead. So having said that, then looking at with this depleted roster going in against Sacramento, we talk about who are the X factor players here. I think it's just anyone who's healthy at this point is the X factor. So let's talk more about the duels. The most interesting one for me right now, Sacramento's Arturo Rodriguez versus either Hugo Bacharach, or if we do a double pivot in the back with the 6s. I think this is what's going to control and dictate both the tempo and like who controls this matchup. Rodriguez is Sacramento's metronome, really just setting pace, setting fluidity, setting transition out of the back for Sacramento Republic. He also has the ability defensively to close down passing lanes as they then take on the opponent's attack. I guess the question here for you is, when you have a player like Arturo Rodriguez, we just talked a second ago, do you do the deeper double pivot or the more forward one? Does your answer change because you have a player like Arturo Rodriguez in the middle?
I don't think so. I think this is one of those situations where we have to kind of trust our own individual players to kind of do what's required of them. I think he is a player that you need to be aware of, but at the same time, I also don't look at him as a quote unquote world beater where we need to put a game plan around him. Just kind of keep an eye on him, if you will.
And then the other duel that I'm the most interested in is it's whoever will play on that left side in terms of, was it Jose Quizera? Is it Leo Alfonso? Is it Noah Fuson? But who's taking on Jack Gurr on that right wing back side? Jack Gurr, one of the best players in the championship. There's a reason Sacramento has locked him down for probably the better part of a decade. I know the contract's not that long, but humor me here. Meanwhile, Jojea, one of the best wingers that are in the league right now, but we didn't see him on the left in the last game. Is this an opportunity? Do you want your best winger to be dueling their best wing back and fullback, or do you keep Jojea on the other side now just so that he doesn't have to run into Jack Gurr on the night?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think considering what Kano likes to continue his experiments for, I think we might see Joe Jaya out on the right again. Also, realistically, we know that while he can contribute defensively, it's never been his strong suit.
I mean, he was part of the reason that goal happened from Silla in Orange County.
Yeah, so in that regards, I think you'd be counting on Darce, or even maybe if we see a reappearance of Sanchez there, to do his best, along with potentially Leo Alfonso, or even if we see someone like Noah end up starting, have them kind of combat against Jacker there.
Do we think then that there's a call here in this match for Aldair Sanchez? I feel like I'm like an apologist / homer at this point for him, because I do want to see him find his way back into the starting 11. But then also you have to remember he comes from Sacramento Republic. It's the only place that he's ever spent time outside of Rhode Island in championship action. It's that club is the club that gave him the ability to play at the professional level to begin with. And if there's one player who's practiced, who's scrimmaged, who's done five-a-side more against a player like Jack Gurr, it's got to be a left back like Aldair Sanchez. Is there a case that he sees the pitch on the night? Because we've seen Kano do these 4D chess moves before by bringing legacy players against their former teams. I'll remind you of Mark Ibarra in last year's Eastern Conference final against the Riverhounds. Do we see a case for Sanchez on the night to start?
I think that is a very good case. He'd be very well experienced with the system. He played with Jack Gurr there with how long he's been there. I think there's a really good possibility that we could see him. It's just with how long we've done this, it's so hard to guess what kind of wants to do. And it feels like he's all, like he said, he's doing 4D chess, and we're always, a step or two behind him.
As we always will be. Before we go to our next break, want to ask you, we talked about momentum from Orange County, but let's talk about the fact this is a midweek match. It's the farthest travel of the club's entire season, going, coast to coast here. And then they got to come back home for some Prinks Tire Cup action against Brooklyn. We've talked at length a couple times when midweek games happen about how does a coach like Kano Smith stack the deck one direction or the other, which game is the more important one to go out and win. I don't think that's really the case here, because we most likely are already out of Prinks Tire action. So really the more important game of the week is this midweek game against Sacramento, where you can get some points and claw back up the table. But it's also so far away and you're so roster depleted. Does that have anything to do with how coach selects this roster here on the week?
I think so. I don't think he will admit it, but I think the reality, like you said, is unfortunately with how tight the point spread is in the Prinks Cup, and us unfortunately losing that Hearts of Pine game, we kind of dug our own grave at that point. So that game, while I think the team is still going to go for it, we really have to rely on it's like remember the meme when it's like, how does Scotland qualify for the World Cup? It's one of those. It's like, well, every other team needs to lose or draw and get multiple red cards. So
you're saying we need Ghana to get a result to advance in the Prinks Tire Cup at this point?
Pretty much. So at that point, tomorrow's game, or tonight, depending when you listen to this, becomes the quote unquote more important match, if you will. So I think we're going to see a stronger squad here and kind of save the rotation for the weekend, especially if we just came after that long break. The guys should be refreshed and ready to go, with the exception of the injuries that we got.
I just don't know how many players we'll even have available for Saturday's match to rotate. Think about, we've got Kevin Vang, Danny Rivera, and CJ Williams might be available. Again, Kano said he was close. Maybe Castro gets a look finally. We've been joking about that all season. But Noah Fuson and Dwayne Atkinson get starts in that match. Our midfield mostly will have to play all three of these games this week because of the depletion, unless we find out some things that Zach Haribo is closer than we realize. It's just interesting. I asked Kano how he felt about the travel and what this would do for the guys, and here's what Coach Kano Smith said about the travel to the West Coast.
I'm not asking them to do that. The schedule and the games are asking them to do that. We say that to them all the time, tracking back and running backwards. That's not me asking you to do that. That's the game demanding that. So the schedule and the travel is demanding that they have to be there. So I don't think I need to get them to that place. I think they'll get there because it's what's demanded.
Omni and CJ haven't been available. So, he's saying, hey, these guys are professionals. They know what they need to do. We're not going to sit here and wax poetic about the fact that this is just one of the more complicated trips of their season. We've got to go to break, and when we return, we're going to talk all things Sacramento Republic, at least as we know it. I know there's a couple experts here in the chat to help us along the way. Don't go anywhere. It's the Raising Anchor Soccer Show.
Now, let's get back to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show on 990 WVOB with Matt Entrican and Jason Carey.
Back here on the Raising Anchor Soccer Show, talking about now Sacramento Republic FC. The opponents for this midweek match as Rhode Island FC heads to California to take them on. And listen, this team is a tale of very fine margins, in my opinion. They are no longer the perennial champions, the outliers, the top of the crop when it comes to how we consider the Western Conference. Currently, like we said, in 10th place, although I don't feel like that standing or position is necessarily fair to where they are actually at in terms of their performance. But it's a team that isn't really under a rebuild, but kind of is under a rebuild when you look at the legacy of some of their tenured players and some of their tenured leaders. Head coach Neil Collins, not a stranger to USL Championship, but on his first year as head coach with Sacramento, not necessarily seeing the same consistency that we've seen out of other coaches at Sacramento Republic, very reminiscent of what Louisville's going through in their transition between coaches now in the season. The key here, though, for what I've noticed from Sacramento watching their games and looking at where they're at, is a lot of these games are very tight affairs, Jason. A lot of these matches are just determined by one single goal, and maybe that's a 3-2 or maybe that's a 1-0. But a lot of the times, Sacramento has been keeping these games very close, not necessarily putting them away, not putting them to bed, but also still in control. Very squeaky bum time by the time you get to those 90 minutes. This first half of the campaign, although they only have 12 games so far, so you could say the first third, it looks like what Sacramento's trying to set up for as a reputation is defense first, and then we'll figure the rest out later. It's very reminiscent of Rhode Island's campaign last year about, hey, we're going to make sure no team scores against us, and we're going to rack up the clean sheets. We'll figure out the offense if we figure the offense out at a later date. And so far, that consistency just isn't there in their attacking third.
Yeah, Collins has really emphasized organization, compactness, and really trying to limit the opponent's quality chances there, allowing the Republic to stay in nearly every match, regardless of the opponent. Like you said, there's such fine margins between the amount of goals that they've scored and let in. It's produced a few impressive road victories against defending champions Colorado Springs Switchbacks, but it also means that every mistake carries very significance when you're playing within those fine margins. When they score first, they're comfortable managing the game, slowing down the tempo, forcing opponents to break down a defensive block, if you will.
I mean, and we've said that about Rhode Island FC at times too. When they score first, the way they set those expectations different than when they're chasing games. I haven't seen Sacramento chase too many times. When they still have the mental discipline, they still have the fortitude, but it is a different approach. It's kind of like what we've seen in the World Cup, where when goals happen, it opens up the playing of the rest of the teams, right? Like you see Brazil suddenly go down and it's like they wake up. Sacramento has that ability within them, but they don't want to wake the beast up within themselves. They just want to play the way that they practice every single week. And I think Rhode Island FC is going to be tested in this manner as they head up to Heart Health Park. They're going to face this side that right now it's like a paper tiger where it looks good. They have some incredible talent. Just the results haven't necessarily come their way. But even saying that, it feels kind of sacrilegious because they've only lost 4 games, similar to Rhode Island FC. That stands for the third best defensive games, or losses, I should say, earned for the season. There's only a couple teams that are better, and that's Tampa Bay at 2, and Louisville at 3 losses. Everything else has been a draw. Otherwise, the rest of the league, they already have 5, 6, 7 or more losses. Talking to you, Sporting Jacksonville, with your infinite loss column there. Sacramento is still going to cause Rhode Island FC problems. It's just going to come completely from their defensive side of things. And we've seen Rhode Island time and time again struggle to break down well-organized defenses. It's why, like Connor said in the last segment, set-piece goal scoring, it might be the key unlock in this match.
Absolutely. And the reason being, too, here is that while they will definitely frustrate RAFC in regards to their defense, they really haven't clicked when it comes to their offense. They've actually scored the second least amount of goals in the entire league with only 13, Only Hartford has scored less with 10. It's really that defense that's kind of kept them from being absolute rock bottom at this, only allowing 12 goals, 1 average per game there. Same as the league leaders, Tampa Bay Rowdies.
I see Ben Johnson in the chat already got to the joke, but this is basically the Pittsburgh Riverhounds of 2025. That's what I'm hearing.
To a certain extent, but remember the Pittsburgh Riverhounds also I feel like they had a few more goals in their locker, though. But not
in the postseason they didn't, but nevertheless. So let's talk about the X factors as we understand it and how this will really shape up on the pitch. I've got Arturo Rodriguez. I know we mentioned him in the last segment, but he really is Sacramento's engine right now. He's not necessarily the player who's going to be doing all the finishing for Sacramento, as they have other problems on the forward line for that. But he is the player that's usually creating the spark and starting the offense in that transition. He already has 3 assists and a goal on the season. That's nothing to scoff at. His vision, his passing range. I mean, he's been an excellent player across the league for a long time. He's going to be a player that Rhode Island FC is going to have to find a way to limit his touches and his spaces, because if you give Arturo time, he may set the terms for how Sacramento wants to play, and that's not going to bode well for Rhode Island. So it's going to be one of those things where you really have to concentrate on making sure that he does not connect the defense to the attack. If he has time to make those kinds of passes, you're going to see something become a really big problem for Rhode Island on the night.
Yeah, and speaking of stubborn defense, Danny Vitiello has been one of the USL Championship's most dependable goalkeepers over the past several seasons.
2 keepers in 2 weeks. I like that you've got this.
Look, when you only let in 12 goals, he's the foundation of their defensive identity. Especially in matches that are decided by 1 goal, he's actually going to be pretty much the difference maker there. This Rhode Island team has shown some improved finishing this year, scoring more goals than recently. But I think Vitiello is really going to make them work for it this weekend. He is an excellent shot stopper, commands the penalty area and crosses, and then gives Sacramento confidence when defending deep.
Yeah, every time I think Koke Vegas is going to win any kind of keeper award, whether it's Golden Glove or any other kind of stat line, I always look, where is Danny Vitiello on that? Because he's always going to be at the forefront of those types of awards. We don't have time for it, but some honorable mentions, or at least some players to watch. I think Forster Ahago is going to be a big moment for them, potentially. He is one of their strikers at the top of the formation, hasn't scored since May, but he has the physicality and the ball movement to where he can be lethal. If Rhode Island FC falls asleep on their own back line, a player like Forster could definitely punish them. And then they also have the legendary substitute goal scorer himself in Kyle Edwards from Hartford Athletic. Move there. Kyle Edwards is not a player that can play more than like 40 minutes. He just doesn't have it in the tank. It's like he's like a Fabregas player. Like, that at a certain age, a certain time, he just can't play more than that amount of time. And but he's still lethal. He still has, I think, 2, maybe 3 goals coming off of only substitute appearances in the league so far this season. And we know how lethal he was last year for Hartford. So those are 2 players that, they could cause problems if Rhode Island FC allows them to.
Yeah. One more just to mention here, LAFC legend Mark Anthony Kaye.
How dare you?
He's definitely at the end of his career, but he's got quite a bit of experience there. Excels at breaking up opposition attacks, controlling possession or pressure. Depending on how this game goes, we might see him. He tends to play more of a sub role, but there's a good possibility we'll see him sub in as well.
Will asked, who's the better keeper, Danny or Koke? We're legally required to say Koke, but we can respect what Danny Vitiello offers to that team.
I think this is a good example of comparison of when you look at when Liverpool and City dominated the Premier League. You look at Alisson and Ederson, 2 very good keepers, and Alisson is the better shot stopper. But if you want to have the better ball playing, you go with Ederson. It's the exact same thing here. If your team wants to have a goalkeeper who can hit a ball to a dime, 39 yards away with 100% accuracy, you pick Koke every time.
I agree 100%. So, looking at this, key takeaways for this matchup, what does Rhode Island FC need to do, in your opinion, to take all 3 points for the first time ever, both against Sacramento, but also away at Sacramento?
I think it's important here that RAFC plays quickly after regaining possession. We don't want them to let it turn into a slow, methodical match. They're going to really want to bring the tempo down here and not allow RAFC opportunities to create chances here, to try and force Sacramento to defend while retreating, try to kind of hit them on speed there, and kind of avoid spells of long, predictable possession that kind of will lull RAFC into kind of a sleep there, if you will. If we can get this game to be played faster, to be played quicker with Sacramento kind of retreating, I think RFC will have a good opportunity to kind of sneak a few in.
Agree. I've got, and I feel like a broken record here, but it's really going to be limiting Arturo Rodriguez. Like I said earlier, everything flows to him. Everything. He's a conduit both forward and backwards. He's very much the Hugo Backrack of this team right now. So making sure you stifle him is probably the most important thing that you have, because remembering, Sacramento wants to build through you, and you need to make sure that Rhode Island FC is pushing them out wide and building around you. You cannot let a player like Arturo Rodriguez find that, dissecting pass, that through pass that's going to unlock the back line. It would be curtains for Rhode Island FC.
Exactly. Taking a quick look at our ref report here for this match. We have referee Elvis Osmanovic. Doesn't immediately ring any negative bells, so hopefully that won't.
He's like refed every single Tampa Bay match, and that's all you need to worry about.
Assistant refs of Jeremy Hansen and Christian Clerc, with fourth official Conrado Garcia.
Yeah. And, if you are watching this game, reminder that it is a 10:30 Eastern time kickoff. So
just like those crazy late World Cup games we've been watching.
We thought it's weird because this is the only break in the World Cup is this one particular day. Every other day up until once quarterfinals are over, then you actually have to give the players rest. But when you think about back-to-back days, tomorrow is the first day off of the World Cup since the beginning of the World Cup, and we're stacking it with another late night game in Rhode Island FC action. So having said that, a reminder, okay, Defiance will not be at the Guild because the Guild will not be open. So don't go to the Guild to watch this game. It will be at High Motor instead. So come and hang out, eat some dollar dogs with us, catch all the action there. And if, of course, you can't catch the action with us, or you just don't want to be out that late, the game will be on Nesson Plus, ESPN Plus, or you can let Tom and Nick serenade you on 790 The Score. Jason, I'm expecting a lot of fun out of this match. I think it's Rhode Island's to take. They are a second half team when it comes to their abilities. If they can weather the storm of Sacramento, I think they'll be good. But the final thing I got to say about Sacramento is they are amazing at home. 11 of their 16 points have come from Heart Health Park. So they are doing the work at home. They've just been struggling more on the road. So this will be a very good test for Rhode Island FC.
Well, maybe it's time for RFC to spoil their party. Thanks for joining us, y'all. Can't wait to see you soon. Have a good one. Anchors up.
Anchors up.
You've been listening to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show. You can follow the show on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and TikTok at RIFC Podcast and at Raising Anchor on Instagram. And be sure to check out and subscribe to Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you listen by searching for Raising Anchor. Make sure to check out all of our coverage over at the Blazing Musket for all your New England soccer coverage, including RAFC news at theblazingmusket.com. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask you to be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the show. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm your main man, Juju, and on behalf of the Raising Anchor crew, goodbye for now. And as always, we are Rhode Island FC.